Opening slide, graphic text title. Harnessing networks to find employment with Milton Tyree. Image of Milton Tyree, logos, belonging matters, and talksthatmatter.net.
So this is what I have prepared for this morning. Our focus is the relational nature of good employment, especially as it relates to customized employment. So I want to begin with a context around the evolution of services that led to customized employment. And then I'm going to define it. And we'll look at this big picture of networking and a couple of ways to do that. We'll be looking at one is the more formal customized plan for employment meeting. And Pat's going to give us a really nice example of that. And we'll be talking about that. But before we do that, we're going to talk about just some other less formal ways of networking. And then we'll get into the customized plan for employment meeting, the facilitation, who's coming, where do you hold it, all those kinds of logistical kinds of things that are really important. And Pat, I'm glad you're here. You can help me out with all of that too. And one of the things you get from the customized plan for employment meeting is a list of qualified businesses. Some of the slides, and sometimes I'll also say targeted business, it's the same thing. What is the business, or what are the businesses that you're going to contact that you have good reason for being there? And we'll just dip our toes in the water a little bit in terms of what you do with that information. So I'm hoping that that's what you all signed up for. Now, since beginning in this work of open employment in 1981, I've seen these three big shifts that relate to what we're going to be talking about tonight. This evolving of our understanding about the relational nature of our work. So instead of just putting people in job placements, devoting time to know the candidate, start with the job and not the person. That was a big shift. Now, that was a number of years back, but it's a big shift. And everybody hasn't made it yet, made the shift. The next big change we'll talk a lot about tonight, and that is, instead of just settling for existing jobs, job descriptions that are out there open to anybody, we've devoted time to know the person and to understand business needs, and then develop a job that's good for the person and is good for the business. That's customized employment. Second big shift. And then the third one is, instead of taking over instruction support through a job coach or a job supporter, that instead of doing that, this again is very relational. We devote time in the business to learn how people typically learn the tasks that are part of their job and who teaches them and how long it takes and all of that. And then we use all of that as much as possible. That's been another big change. So here I just have same three shifts here, but I have some people to put with them. Start with the person, not the job. So again, it's a relational aspect of that, really digging into to really know a person. Who is this person? These are photos of Millie in her year 12 customized internship at a company called KBR in Canberra. And later we'll be taking a brief look at discovery and a family connection that led to the development of this internship for Millie. That was the big shift. Start with the person, not the job. Discovery. The second big shift is looking beyond typical job descriptions, customized employment, learning about what a business needs and how that's a fit for the person you're representing. This is Jack and his customized job at Unilodge at ANU. And we'll be looking at job design and family connections that led to this job too. So negotiating jobs of mutual benefit for employee and the business, rather than just taking existing jobs. And then the third big shift has to do with employment supports and how that's provided. We'll not get so much into that today, but nonetheless, it's important to mention it. This is Gus, also in Canberra, working at Martino's Hair and Grooming for Men. And we will look at how Gus's community involvement led to the development of his job here. But the point of this slide is that Gus did not have a job coach teach him the tasks here. All of the tasks were learned through instruction on the job from the other men who work in the shop. So this relational nature of our work, the first part of it is knowing the job candidate, or sometimes I'll use the word job seeker, the person with a disability who's looking for a job. And so I'm going to ask y'all this question. Whether you're new to discovery or you've done it for a really long time, what are examples of things that you need to learn about people related to work before you start looking for work? Just put as many things in chat as you can. You can put more than one, and everybody can watch your chat box. Let's just see what we can stir up here. What kinds of things need to be learned? Yeah, the passions, likes and dislikes, hobbies. Yeah, what kinds of stuff do you do in your spare time? What are your values? What's important to you? Your dreams, communication needs, absolutely. A lot of people I know don't communicate by speaking. How do you communicate? What do you enjoy doing? Your interests, your skills. What kinds of stuff you're good at doing? What are your goals later in life? Your strengths and your interests, your outgoingness, your personality, your patience, right? All of these personal characteristics, the way people learn, how people get to and from work. Location, 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 right? What the conditions of work, the vision of a life well lived. Yeah, So much stuff around condition. Okay, so that's really good. Thank you. Thank you very much. All right, so the next question. So the first part of the relationship is really knowing the person, the job seeker. The second part of it is really getting to know businesses. And this is what we're going to dip our toes in the water a little bit. You need a targeted business or a qualified employer. And so we have a process. I'll describe briefly the business job seeker compatibility analysis. So same thing in chat. What kinds of things would you want to learn about a business related to a job you might want to negotiate? Maybe for somebody you know, right? Same kind of thing. What would you want to know about that business? Just put some things in chat if you would. Hey, and what else you do? Okay, that was actually for the former one, but it also relates to here. What kinds of things you need to learn about business? The culture. Yes, the work culture. How do people get along with each other? What are the condition of people in work is so important. The attitudes, the kindness, interactions. What is the environment like, or the spaces? Absolutely. Yes. Yes. I mean, there's so many things here around conditions of coworkers, which is so critical. Understanding people roles, you got to have the right people. Sensory environment. Yeah, for people for whom sensory overload is an issue. Job tasks, gaps in tasks, environment, training, mentoring. Exactly. How do people typically learn their jobs here? Really, all of this stuff to learn. Business ideas of risks and barriers. Yeah, opportunity to settle long-term, full scope of the business. Yeah, what's really important to them? What makes them tick? Excellent. Thank you. Thank you for that. Very good. So you all know what you're talking about here. I know that now. So, and I suspected it would be true. So these are the kinds of things that, to me, that you put in chat for both of those. Things to learn about the person, things to learn about the business, and then you look at how do those two fit together. So we are going to just talk quickly here about customized employment. Now, there are two distinct approaches to job development. Both are perfectly valid. The first one is what I call labor market open employment job development. Like sometimes fitting, challenging, socially valued work may be found by filling an existing job description. That happens, and that's fine. Discovery is at the foundation, just like it would be for customized employment. That is, the typical job had work conditions that made sense for the person, relates to the person's interest related to work, and ways that the person contributes. But for many people, in order to get fitting, challenging, socially valued work, a customized job is what's needed, where there's a personalized approach to job design that meets the needs of the business, while also fitting the conditions, interests, and contributions of the job candidate. The real difference to me boils down to this idea of contribution versus competition. Because we believe that everybody has something to contribute. And this can happen in typical job descriptions and labor market jobs and in customized jobs. But it is the competition that has been the problem for so many people, which is why we need customized employment, because a lot of people I know, if they have been limited to competing with everybody else for labor market jobs, then one of two things happens. One, they won't be able to compete and they just don't get hired. So they're unemployed. The other is that the nature of the jobs where they can compete will result in them being underemployed or just in a job that's not a very good fit. And so it doesn't fit their conditions, interests, and contributions. Thus, we need customized employment. So those of y'all who have seen me before have heard me go through this, but I'm going to do it again just around the idea for people who haven't seen it. And so we have a really good understanding of what we mean by customized employment, what it is and what it isn't. Now, this is a handout that I'll send a PDF file to Carmen for. It's a 12-page document called The Essential Elements of Customized Employment. This is where it came from. Back in 2017, there were 4 organizations in the US teaching customized employment. One of them is Mark Golden Associates, where I'm an associate, but also Griffin Hammis Associates. They've done a lot of work in Australia. Transcend and Virginia Commonwealth University. And so we decided we should all come to an agreement about what customized employment means. So I have pulled out some principles from this paper. And just real quickly, this is what they are. Determination of a person's interests, conditions, and contributions through a qualitative approach of discovery. So discovery always underlies customized employment. You can't fail discovery. It's a no-fail process. There should be a planning meeting that we are going to talk about today, and Pat's going to give us a good example of it. This should be held in a timely manner following the completion of discovery. Customized employment occurs in businesses in the community or businesses owned by the individual, but it's not a business owned by a human service or a special business developed somehow. It's a typical business either owned by the person or out in the typical world. It involves negotiation of job duties. Job supporters or job coaches should avoid job openings and the typical personnel processes. Why? Because they are competitive and they have kept a lot of people out. That's why we avoid them. So we have other approaches besides typical job openings and typical personnel practices. It requires individualization. One job for one person. Negotiated pay of at least minimum wage. This is a US terminology. For you, you would think the typical award wage is what we're aiming for here, what we need to get. The job supporter or job coach is really an agent, the person's agent to represent their interests in job development. We need to have strategies for helping businesses look for specific areas of their business that might benefit from the person we're representing. The job supporter is the primary customer. Now, When I'm working with somebody in customized employment, I really have two customers, the business and the person, but the person with the disability is always the primary customer. We should emphasize an informational relationship with businesses that we contact. So what this means is this isn't some kind of big high pressure sales thing. No, it is I'm contacting you about somebody who I think might have something really important to contribute to your business. Would you be interested in learning about how we negotiate jobs? And so we'll talk a little bit about how to get in the door and what to say. But the point is, it's not like we're going to make you do this or you have to do it. It's a voluntary relationship and it's informational in nature. If it's not a good fit for the business, we move on. We should develop, this relates to the third big shift here. Job supporters should negotiate a support plan with employers that honors typical ways for the new employee for instruction and support as much as possible. And it facilitates mutually beneficial voluntary relationships. So who most benefits? These would be people who have failed or performed poorly on vocational evaluations or community-based assessments. Why? Because we don't do that. We work with people in discovery instead. We don't care about tests. People who have the most significant impact of disability or multiple disabilities, people who have been fired or quit from multiple jobs in the community. I think of this as it's probably just been kind of place and pray. Here's a job, let's see how it works. And a lot of people for whom that has happened just have these histories that are not of their making, but have impacted them. They almost have become convinced they can't work, which is unfortunate. People who have multiple life complexities even beyond disability, transportation, minimal family support, so forth. People who have experienced years of human service segregation, never been out in the world very much outside of congregated, segregated programs, have uncertain or challenging behaviors, people who say they have little interest in going to work. Yeah, because sometimes I think people have been convinced, again, they've had such lousy work experiences that they think they can't work or they wouldn't like work. And so here, it's not, again, this isn't forcing people, but saying, let's give this a try. Let's give this a try. How about we just spend some time together and figure out what kinds of things you're good at doing, that you enjoy doing, what kinds of things need to be in place for you to feel really contributive and you belong. Let's figure all that out and give it a try, would you? Let's give it another chance. People who are uncertain about the kind of work they would perform, and this is really important to me, people who may be competitive in terms of getting to land a competitive job, but that competitive job doesn't speak to who the person is. It's just something that they could compete for and get, you know, and it's going to be really limiting and they'll be underemployed. All right. So now, this is Mark Golden Associates' way of thinking about customized employment. And so we look at balancing the equation. It's good for the business. It's good for the person we're representing. We focus our time on watching what employees do and getting to know them. Focus on the work setting and focus on what's going on with customers. And we start with job candidate, and you guessed it, conditions, interest, and contributions, what we learn in discovery. We want to honor that. And then the business side is the other side. And so here we look at addressing unmet needs in the business, things that aren't getting done the way they need to get done, that are a fit for the job candidates, conditions, interest, and contributions. That helps balance the equation. Here's something you're not getting unless we help you with it. Tasks that enhance the business. These are particular things, sometimes new tasks. We'll look at an example of one of these, one of my Australian stories, a new task that, again, the business can use, but they hadn't thought of it before, and it's a good fit for the job seeker, their conditions, interests, and contributions. And then this last one, tasks better performed by others. And what we mean here is you're spending time in the business and you notice somebody who's pretty far up on the hierarchy there, somebody who's a manager or has a lot of credentials around their work. And what it is that they're doing, the person you're representing could do that. And so you say, wouldn't it free up some of your time to do more managerial stuff if Mary did that instead? So that's tasks better performed by others. So that's the idea here. That's the balancing of the equation, what we're looking at here. All right, so this next part is how can we be more intentional about using networks? Now, this is some data from the US on how people get jobs from the United States Department of Labor. And as you can see, the primary way that people get jobs is informal associations, networking. Who do you know? Who do you know who'd be good at this? Or have you thought about doing this? I mean, that is just so important and so prevalent. And I would guess that the same thing is true in Australia. Am I right? It's a primary way for people getting jobs here. I would think that would be the case. So, I mean, somebody was just asking about valued roles. I know that Belonging Matters is an organization that's rooted in social role valorization theory or SRV theory. You offer events in SRV and so forth, which is really, really important. And I have the same orientation to my work. And what we're looking at here is just a perfect fit for the social role valorization principle of the culturally valued analog, or the CVA. So what is it that happens in this realm of life for people who have a valued social status? This is the predominant way that most people get jobs, is by networking. So I'm sure it's one of the reasons that you invited me to do a workshop on it. It's important for everybody. Now, we're going to look at this in two dimensions. The first is more informal. Just, looking at work possibilities. I'll show you a few different examples from some Australians I've met who've just gotten their work through relationships they had or their families had. And then the second is more formal. This is where we'll look at Pat's example and some other digging into more to organizing a meeting. So this first one is just the job seeker, family, friends, knowing people. And the second one is the planning meeting. But here's the but. Both of these rely on discovery. So need to do either a brief introduction or a brief review about what we mean about discovery. I had already been involved in the work of open employment for 7 years before this came along. And what a relief it was to me. 1988, this idea of discovery surfaced. And it's a common sense process that doesn't involve testing people, doesn't involve comparing people to other people. None of that. It's a process for getting to know people and helping people get to know themselves before developing plans. It's spending time with people and learning, who is this person, instead of testing or evaluating people. You've heard these words. It's about learning with people about what they're interested in doing, the conditions they need to have in work to be at their best. So many people, when I ask, what would you want to learn about a person, and what would you want to know about a business? So many people know to the condition of personal interaction. And that is one condition that's just really important. Who are your supervisors and who are your coworkers? What is the nature of your supervisors and coworkers? Many other conditions too, like the nature of the task, the nature of the environment, and all of that. But conditions, really, really, really important. If I was going to think of one thing that I just felt like back in the old days we didn't pay attention to, and jobs didn't work out very well, is work conditions. And then what is it that people have to contribute? So those are the three big things we learn. and it prepares us for customized job development. We use this iceberg analogy at Mark Gold and Associates because so often decisions are made for people, usually not with people, but for people based on this really surface understanding about who they are, just the tip of the iceberg. And what we recognize in discovery is we really need to know so much more about people. And, you know, so much of this learning with people is people learning things about themselves that they didn't know, like that very first point on the other slide. And it's not just what people tell you, it's what you observe, you know? A lot of times people don't tell you, it's just seeing, you know, what are you seeing? Spending time with this person. What can you learn about their life experiences, their gifts, their talents, their challenges, their vulnerabilities? We have three primary ways of learning with people in discovery. The first is just spending some time with people in everyday life. What kinds of stuff do you do around the house, around the neighborhood? You know, you have a faith community you're involved in. Who do you know? What kinds of stuff do you do? What do you enjoy doing? What are you good at doing? Can I spend some time with you doing that to learn more about it? So that's a big piece, really, really big throughout. And then after you've spent some time with people learning about things that work really well, you try some new stuff with people. Well, if that worked really well, have you ever done this? Let's try this and see how this is. Just stretching the possibilities and trying to get some more definition around thinking about what good work looks like. You also get permission to interview other people who would have high expectations and get their insights and ideas. And then later in the process to get some permission to do a record review, a discerning record review, all around conditions, interest, and contributions. And this particular slide shows as much as possible. We're looking for where the kind of the sweet spot where these three come together: conditions, interest, and contributions. And we're always keeping in mind that we're searching for the most valued of options. Somebody asked the question about how do you support people in value social roles. So, you know, this relates to one of the themes of SRV theory. You look for the most valued of options within the range of options that are a fit for the person. And it is about imagining, based on what you've seen, what could be possible, not just moving with what's currently in place or readily available. Now, I'm going to show an example of how discovery was used. Daniel in school of work kind of situation. So this was an internship that Millie had, and the discovery with Millie was all family derived and family initiated. And so let's take a look at her conditions. Right at the top, you see some people conditions for Millie: engaging and friendly people, prefer to work in a small supportive team. And part of this for Millie was also, may be implied, but it needs to be explicit, consistent team, you know, consistent, same people. So everybody gets to know everybody, gets to know Millie, what she's good at doing, you know, what kinds of things are harder for her, how does she learn, all of that. So work in a small supportive team. And then, you know, she has a lot of setting and task considerations here, or conditions. Avoid being on her own or isolated. Noisy and crowded, you know, chaotic stuff doesn't work for Millie. No. Got to do things fast, tasks done quickly. Now, tasks done well, Millie's going to be on it, but not tasks that have to be done quickly, not that pressure. That's not going to work. And then contingent tasks. When you get everything done, what's something that's always a backup task you can go do? That's really important because, you know, it's really, you know, for Millie, she and her family recognize that downtime is really stressful. It is for lots of people. Like, what do I do when I don't have something to do? And so, what are some contingency kinds of things? All of this is going to need to be constructed. She wants to know what to expect when she shows up from work, structure, routine, list, timetables, have her own workspace, that kind of stuff. So general conditions. What kinds of stuff was Millie interested in? Well, you can tell from these top ones, she has a creative bent about her. And, she really likes sewing. She likes art, dancing, music. The fourth one's kind of interesting to me. I almost think of it more as a contribution or a skill than an interest, but it's also an interest. But just to take a sidestep here for a second, if Millie's good at doing 1,000-piece puzzles, this talent or interest itself lends to thinking about another principle of discovery that a lot of you be familiar with, and that is translation. If Millie has the concentration and the visual and organizational awareness and the patience to put together a 1,000-piece puzzle, then what other kinds of marketable tasks would be fitting, challenging, and interesting, and around specific contributions for the business? She also really likes dogs and horses, and she loves interacting with people. And so these are her contributions. Now, contributions are the kinds of things, when you learn these in discovery, these are kinds of things that you talk about with business people. Millie, I mean, she's a really creative young woman, and she has a real eye for color and design, how things go together. She's really organized and methodical, and if things need to be just a certain way, she's the person to do it. She's got a great memory. She's really motivated to do things the way they need to be done. And she's got a good sense of humor. So all of these are attributes, skills and personality characteristics that Millie brings to work. And this is her internship at KBR. She was sure that all the copiers were filled with paper. And she was responsible for setting up the meeting rooms when they're having a big meeting there, and also organizing stuff in the kitchen, getting packets of information ready for meetings, greeting visitors, at the reception desk. And now they didn't have dogs and horses, but they did have fish. So Millie fed the fish there. Now, this is a job that was came through family derived discovery learning with their daughter, and also through personal family contacts that I'll talk about in just a second. So this is the first stab before our break that we're going to take a look at connections. And so this is where the job seeker, family, or friend, it's less formal. You just know people. And it's like, so this is outside of having a formal meeting. Millie didn't actually have a formal meeting, for this idea to come up. But her mom, Simone, participated in a group where she met Roz, who you can see actually in sitting behind the information desk here, talking to Millie on the photo on the right. Roz has a son with a disability. And Simone was explaining that she had a daughter with a disability who was looking for an internship and the kind of thing she was looking for. And Roz was really interested in exploring that further at KBR, which is Kellogg Brown and Root, one of the world's largest science, technology, and tech engineering firms. So that was pretty cool. Now, it was a work experience internship. So, it wasn't a full-time job. And by its nature, being during school and all, it wasn't full-time. But it gave Millie a really good, solid taste of work. And think of the image of this. This is a really highly respected company. I can kind of envision somebody coming up to Millie and saying, well, you're in year 12. What you doing now, Millie? Well, I have an internship at KBR. Go, wow. Well, tell me about that, you know. So it's just a really, it was a really good experience. So let's look at some other ones. These are just around relationships that people or their families have. This is Jack. And one of the first jobs he got, he was 15 years old. And it was as a casual weekend job as a soccer referee at his local soccer club. And how did he know people there? Because by the time he was 15, he'd already been playing soccer there for 12 years. And so he must have started when he was 3, like little tiny soccer. So here Jack is as a game leader for 4 and 5-year-olds and for 6 and 7-year-olds. He sets up the games, he co-facilitated with others the skill development sessions and provided encouragement for the young aspiring soccer players. So Jack's there in the middle of the crowd teaching. Look at that. What a great experience. Same kind of thing, Daniel, I was talking about. You know, good, solid youth work experience. And that was through a connection that Jack had because he was well known as a soccer player. That's another reason, you know, that you want to play soccer with everybody else, not in a special soccer league. He was well established there. Now, so Jack currently works at a job at ANU at Uni Lodge. And this contact at ANU was through somebody that his mom knew. And this particular job did not come through a customized plan for employment meeting. It was more informal. It came through conversations with this person that Jan, his mom, knew. And Jan, and the support person hired by the family, Julia, went to Uni Lodge. They looked around and they looked for tasks that would be a good fit for Jack around his interest and the kinds of things he was good at doing. And one of the things that they found was an unmet need. The students were having all these packages come in, like from Amazon, and people weren't having time to catalog in the packages, put them in the computer, to give them out to students when they came down to get them, to notify students they had a package by email, and all of that, you see. And so that's Jack's job, to do all of that. And then they found some other things for Jack to do. And one of these is a task that was created around their imagination, thinking about things Jack's good at doing that they might need. They said, have you ever thought about delivery to the students' rooms? And they started this during exam time. Well, they thought, well, that's really neat. We've never done that before. So that's an example of a task of particular benefit to the business that also would be a good fit for Jack. But this was a family connection outside of a customized plan for employment meeting. Now here's Gus. I showed you a quick picture of him earlier. So Gus is the second man here from the right. He's been working at Martino's now for about 1.5 years. Gus was a customer, or I think they call them clients, at Martino's, this upscale barbershop. And he got to know the men there, and they needed somebody to perform some barber assistant tasks. And because they knew Gus and they liked him, they offered him a job. How about that? And then Gus and his mom and dad negotiated starting tasks that gradually increased with complexity, kind of around to the point of, Sandra, your question about, you know, hours and work and that kind of thing. And they did increase because tasks increased. He started off with pretty rudimentary things like brushing hair off the client's shoulders, folding capes, disinfecting combs, fixing the hot towels. But pretty soon they had him ordering coffee for clients, which meant going next door to the coffee shop and bringing the coffee back. Preparing the cutthroat razors is one of the things. That sounds pretty important. Mixing hair colors. And then they started looking at other things like learning how to charge for services and products. And one of the things that they enlisted Gus to do was selecting the day's playlist, something that would be generationally appropriate. And he was of an age range to do this. And this last one's really cool. He's learning to cut hair. See that picture on the right? Is that cool or what? Now, one of the things the barbers didn't know when they wanted to hire Gus was he had another job. Excuse me. He had another job at CSIRO, which was a job that Gus's mom, Jackie, helped him get. She knew Michelle, who has a daughter with a disability, who worked at CSIRO. And this was connected with kinds of things that Gus was interested in doing and good at doing. And he's been there for 5 years. So they've needed to schedule, be sure his barbering assistant schedule coincided with his CSIRO work. This is kind of similar. This is a Brisbane story, kind of similar to Gus, in that Bobby is a really athletic man, and he's also well known as a good swimmer at Centenary Pool. He had a lot of relationships with other people. He was interested in customer service kind of stuff, and he got his job at Rackley's at Centenary Pool just because they knew him there. And this is something he's been pursuing in other realms too. This is a picture. No, I'm sorry. This is him at Centenary Pool. This is a picture of his own business that he started with the combi van. So this was a really neat story. So Tyler is the young man in the middle of these men in front of PSI Speed Factory. And it's just another, to go back to you again, Daniel, another work experience story that is just so cool, I think. So Tyler's this guy who just really likes cars. I'm a car guy, so I understand. I'm just really fascinated by cars and fast cars. Don't have one like that, never have, but I'm fascinated by him, and he is too. So I don't remember where they were headed, but I remember that he and his mom would always head by this PSI Speed Factory, and it's a shop where they take cars and soup them up and all that. So he always wanted to stop there, and his mom would go, no, what would you do? And he goes, well, I just want to go in and see what they do. And so once she said, okay, let's just stop. And he went in and was talking, I guess talked to the people at the desk. Other people saw him, and he would stop there periodically, and the guys got to know him. And they really liked him, and they found out, that he knows a thing or two about cars. And they said, how would you like to work here? And so he got to work and do all kinds of other kinds of things. I've got this little clip of his mom. I mean, this to me just hits at this relational part of our work and how important it is. I've got this little 90-second clip of his mom, Beck, talking about his experiences in the shop and outside of the shop. And I'd just like you to listen to what she describes so eloquently. And I'd like you to write down everything you can in 90 seconds that she says about his experiences and his relationships through work. So here we go.
Building his connections within the community, Tyler has been able to establish relationships and friendships with the young men who work in the workshop. They have invited him to race days where he's been able to visit the pits where the cars get ready for those races. He's been able to meet them on the weekends at places called Cars and Coffee, which is exactly what it is, cars and coffee. People get together drinking coffee and talking about cars. He has met people who bring their cars into the workshop, and he then, through chatting, he works out where they are going to be, and they catch up. He catches up with them down at the local barbershop here in our community. He also builds friendships and relationships with people because he wants to take photos of their cars, and he has developed a social media page where local car enthusiasts are actually liking his Instagram posts and sharing that connection. And as he gets older, those relationships are forging even stronger, and I know that that is going to be the way forward for him, and developing that connection and Friendships with those people are going to be the things that will help guide and navigate through those tricky teenage years for him.
So write down in chat everything you heard that's around an experience or a skill or something that developed through these relationships that Tyler had with the other men at the speed shop. Friendship. Yeah. Yeah. Connections with others, commonality with others, using social media to extend relationships. So the skills involved in doing all that, connections with other people, community connections, barber, cars with coffee, all of that, outside events, love of cars, growing network. Yeah. Natural connections, social media presence. I mean, you just think of this guy. Yeah, building confidence. Absolutely. Just, I mean, here's this guy. Just think of how positive this has been for him. Yeah, photography skills. Now, didn't even mention the kinds of things he does around the shop, like helping him get tools and stuff like that. And I think some minor kinds of work on cars around the shop. You know, non-certified kinds of things that he's learning to do, but they're teaching him car skills too. So anyhow, I just thought, you know, one of the things that we don't want to see happen with youth is that they get out of school and they have this awful idea about work. Oh, I don't want to work, you know? So you know, just I'm thinking of Millie and Jack and Gus got the job as CSIRO, I think, right out of school, and and Tyler, just these really solid work experiences, so that people have a good taste of work is one of the best things that can happen. So I would agree that you really want to look at, ideally, I usually think of like 8 to 12 people, and half, half people being paid people, half people being unpaid people. And there are people who can be pretty isolated, but as Deb was saying, it's one of the things that we look for in discovery is who have you met along the way in the process of discovery that you might invite to the meeting. And sometimes there will be a particular interest area that will be really strong. And you don't have I mean, like there isn't somebody that comes to mind. And so you try to find somebody who you could invite to the meeting who hasn't met the person with discovery. Like Emily said, she didn't know everybody at her meeting. So there needs to be somebody within the group who could invite the person. But what we tell people is, I mean, I can think of an example, a young man who just had this drive to work in the library system. And so daggone it, we needed a librarian at that meeting. And not that library was going to be the only thing, but we definitely didn't want to ignore library because that was so strong. And so there was somebody who knew a librarian to invite to the meeting. And we just explained, so this is the person's background. And the first part of the meeting, you're going to be the only person who doesn't know him, but that's okay. You know, you're not going to be able to contribute when we're talking about conditions, interest, and contributions. But when we're looking at tasks, you're going to be great. You know, you're going to be looking at the kinds of things he's good at doing and interested in doing, and you know what kinds of tasks go on in a library. And so that's where we particularly are going to want you to help us. And you may know some connections, but like Patricia was saying, we don't want anybody to feel like you're being invited to the meeting because you got to offer up a job. But just to think about, who do I know who works in some kind of company that you might contact? And so anyhow, we'll get more into that. But I think that was just a really expert explanation of how all that works. So thank you for that. And I'm going to share some slides, many of which will repeat what it is that you described to us. So here we're looking at this second avenue, convening what we call at Mark Golden Associates a customized plan for employment meeting. The idea here, we say, is to develop a blueprint to be used in job development, where we're looking at what was learned during discovery related to people's conditions, interests, and contributions. And based on this information, to develop a task list and think about what employers may need those tasks. And is there anybody in the gathering there who knows somebody in the company that we might contact? That's the essence of what we're looking at doing here. So the meeting is about employment, not about feasibility for employment. To echo something that Patricia said, if there's somebody who is kind of a naysayer, why would it be important for Ralph to work? This is not a person to invite to the meeting. These need to be people. We're not discussing feasibility. These are people who want to be a partner in thinking about what good employment would be. And also, in terms of facilitation of the meeting, we think of the person who facilitated discovery being the facilitator of the information. We have somebody else to scribe, to record the information, but the meeting belongs to the job seeker. And so it's a matter of the facilitator checking in with this job seeker. Well, we never really thought about that particular idea before. What do you think, Ralph? Does that go up on the board? It's based on the findings in the discovery process, has a balance of paid and unpaid people, and facilitated by the person who worked with the person in discovery. So who should be invited? There's a lot, really this slide is around preparing the job seeker for the CPE meeting, to talk through the meeting. So this is the first person that I asked who to be invited. Then of course you also ask the family who would be invited. And you may need some ideas of your own. You may think, well, I remember, a guy we met at the shop, seemed to know you pretty well. What about inviting him? So discussing who would be invited is the first thing. And then I always walk through the process with the job seeker and their family to talk through the charts and to be sure that really to look at everything that's been learned in discovery around conditions, interest, and contributions, and to be sure we have a robust list of those. We'll ask people for their own ideas, but typically we'll seed the charts with some really big ideas, kind of like the ones we had for Emily. I don't mean Emily, I mean Millie on the slides that I showed from her. This is what we're talking about in terms of a work condition for people, in other words, small team of people, and have that on the chart in advance. Be sure with the job seeker and the family, things that you want to be sure get up on the charts. Is there any sensitive information? If so, how are you going to handle it? The job seeker knows that he or she has veto power. And always, if I'm facilitating discovery, somebody I've gotten to work with, I'll say, tell them about the story, when we did this, so that there's a sharing of information and all of the story isn't coming from me. And deciding how to invite people. And Patricia said that you all have worked out a kind of a template for how to do that. Very good. This who attends is really critical. Obviously, the job seeker, family members who give support, friends and neighbors, community members. A lot of times people have, somebody from organizations, faith communities, and professionals and service providers are part of this. So, Patricia, I'm interested in your ideas about this too, but what I always look for in terms of where to have it is a neutral kind of space where, if I'm working for an agency, I recommend you not have it at the agency because that seems more like your space. It could be the person's home, and I've been to some nice meetings at people's homes, but we'd like to do charts, and sometimes there's not space for charts. Anyhow, homes can be nice if people really want to do it in their home, but a lot of times community centers have worked out really nicely, like libraries, public libraries. Been to lots of meetings in public libraries, or meetings in people's church, meeting rooms in people's churches, private meeting rooms in restaurants, that kind of thing. Community centers. You want to be sure you have nice, comfortable room for people, and you bring something to eat. At least in Kentucky, where I live, that's real important. So we're looking at this blueprint for 3 outcomes: conditions, interest, and contributions. Flesh out what's been learned to get a new information from the group. The task list for the interests, and a list of specific employers. So what I thought we might do, just as an exercise, is work through the business contact list. And so we're going to start with a simulated, this is like a simulated meeting for Jack Kruger. This is another of the jobs that Jack had in Canberra, working in service at Government House. But this is, we would start with, I put all of this on one page. Typically this would be several charts, but I put it all on one page so we can see it all at once. Some conditions that are important for Jack. Some of these would be tangible outcomes. You can see what you got done. He's a member of a team of people. Structure and routines really important. A task variety, not the same task all the time. Avoid noisy and crowded and crowded and no downtime. Kind of like with Millie. And his interests, he's a real fitness kind of a guy, really big in exercise and fitness. He's always liked collecting mail, like family mail, and sorting out packages and stuff. And AFL tipping is a big interest of his. Some of his contributions here, he's really encouraging and welcoming. He's a really physically strong young man, really good sense of direction, and a natural leader. So the next thing is to come up with tasks. Now, I'm going to show you a page that really helped me rethink about this, because when you ask about tasks, I mean, this is my experience, Patricia. I don't know what yours has been, but when you ask for tasks at a planning meeting, people will often give job titles. Cashier, stalker, I don't know, but they will give job titles rather than tasks. And the reason we don't want job titles is that puts us back into competitive employment. We're looking for competition for job titles that have job descriptions. We want to think in terms of tasks, and that can be quite a discipline, because we humans aren't used to thinking about work and work tasks as required in the meeting. Well, when I was in Brisbane last year, one of the partner organizations, family capacity building organizations that I know you all work with a lot, is CREW, Community Resource Unit. And they showed me this graph from one of their meetings that I just thought was really good. And so I'm sharing it with you. Like, if somebody says IT help desk or support technician, you say, okay, you don't shut people down and say, we're not talking about job titles. You say, okay, tell me what kinds of tasks an IT help desk support technician does. And you see this cool list of tasks like customer service, give instructions, problem solving, installing software, installing upgrades, cleaning something, customer contact, hardware repairs, so forth. So anyhow, that to me was really helpful. And I thought, well, that's just a really nice way of reframing the task question if people start naming names of jobs. So these are examples of tasks for Jack. So groups are usually pretty good after they understand. We're not looking at competitive work. We're looking at tasks that would be a good fit for Jack's conditions, interest, and contribution. So you can see here, like delivering documents, instructing fitness classes, setting up equipment in rooms. This is fitness equipment, I think, is what they're thinking of, and document compiling. So the question for the group then is, can you think of businesses that need these tasks that also would fit conditions, interest, and contributions, like, where somebody could be a team member, there'd be task variety and so forth. So what I'm going to ask you all to do, if Carmen, if you can send people off for 7 minutes, I want people to try to think of tasks or businesses and contact people that you know in your community. And if you want to take like a photograph of this screen with your phone or something so that you can see the conditions, interests, and contributions and the tasks. I'll give you a second to do that. And then you'll be in your rooms. Let's see, it's 9:44 my time, 11:44 your time. Let's do this in 5 minutes, a 5-minute break to do this. And just think of businesses and contact people you know that might be a fit for Jack where you live. So take a picture of the slide so you have this in your groups. And just a few things to say about this. The business list, you need to know the kind of business, like an attorney office, a fitness center, or whatever. And then you dig down, what is an actual fitness center that somebody knows? And they'll say Planet Fitness or something. And then who knows somebody at this particular Planet Fitness? So that's the idea. And the reason that's the idea is this is your qualified list of employers. This is the list that comes from the meeting, from this process. And it is a list of businesses, not for sure that are going to have what's needed for Jack, but there's a good possibility of it, or at least a possibility, because it fits with his conditions, interest, and contributions and the tasks that were named. And so after the meeting, the first thing you do is you schedule another time to sit down with Jack and his folks and prioritize and say, well, let's figure this out a little bit. What would be, of all of these, might there be ones you want to research, learn a little bit more about? What would be, or where would be ones you'd want to start, figure all that out? But these are your qualified employers. And somebody asked in chat, I noticed, how long is the meeting? 90 minutes, hour and a half, no longer than that. Nice refreshments, 90 minutes. Pleasantries before meeting, finish. It seems to flow real nicely in 90 minutes. So let's see what happens after you've got the information. Like you have a list of qualified employers, and really your ask at that point is, you're looking at a 25-minute appointment. And it's really good, you see, if you have a contact when you're contacting the business, because you can say, Bill Landis suggested I give you a call. And the person you're calling is going to know Bill Landis, and her ears are going to perk up. Oh, I know Bill. So I know Bill, and he suggested I give you a call. Do you have a few minutes? And ultimately, you're going to get around to asking for a 25-minute appointment, but you give your reason for contacting. Bill suggested I give you a call. I get to work with businesses and people with disabilities to design jobs that are good for both. And I'm contacting you because Bill thought that you might have work that would be a really good fit for the person I'm representing that would benefit your business. So one of the things, I'm going to want to learn about is, more about your business. And I work in partnership with businesses and people with disabilities. I have CE Explainer here. I'm going to show you an example of that in a second. And then you represent the job seeker that you have in mind, and a visual resume is a way that we do that. at Mark Golden Associates. And if you create some interest in that 25-minute meeting around your ways of designing jobs that are good for the business and good for the person and the person you're representing, what I'd really like to do is come spend some time in your business to learn about your operation and you know, if there'd be something that would be beneficial for both. So this is an example of something developed by another one of the family capacity building organizations y'all work with, Imagine More in Canberra. This was developed by them. So I have permission to share this with you. This is a nice kind of leave behind around customized employment. So I'll share that. I don't have permission to share Jack's visual resume. We don't really have time to look at it, but to develop a visual resume, again, is a non-competitive form that shows performance photos of somebody related to the kind of work they're seeking. This is another document that was developed by Family Advocacy Resourcing Inclusive Communities. The other family capacity building organization you all work with in Sydney, and I have permission to share this document. This is where you go in to learn about unmet needs, tasks better performed by others, tasks of particular benefit to the business. And so those are some things that I'll share with you later. And that's like on the employer relational end, but it's such an important piece. You know, how do I dig in and really learn about what's important to people? This is an email address I'll share in the slide so you guys can get in touch with me. And I know I'm out of time because I know you all have some information you want to share at the end, Deb and Caroline and Carmen. So apologize for running a couple minutes over. I'll turn it over to y'all.
Closing slide graphic text, with thanks to Milton Tyree. Produced by Belonging Matters. Belonging Matters makes every effort to provide accurate and up-to-date material. However, information is subject to change and our materials for reference only. This video was made possible with the support of an information and capacity building grant through the Department of Social Services. This video was produced on the land of the Wurundjeri Woi-wurrung people of the Kulin Nation. Logos, Belonging Matters, and talksthatmatter.net.